It was past midnight, and the motor park was empty. Uche stood beside his wrecked car, smoking his cigarette while he hoped for one last passenger to end the day. The heat in Lagos was terrible, and even at night it wasn't much better. He wiped his face with a handkerchief and looked around the car park again. It was just him and few street dogs looking for scraps to eat. But he knew they would find nothing. Gone are those days when people threw packs of food that had leftovers. Now everyone eats even the last grain of rice. Sighing, he entered his car and attempted to start it up. Initially, his engine groaned like it was too lazy to start. But it finally picked up. Uche decided he wouldn't get any more customers that night. Maybe tomorrow will be better, he thought to himself. As he put his car in reverse, he saw a figure walking towards his car. Immediately, he turned off his engine and waited for them to walk up to the car. Uche looked out of the passenger's window to observe the customer. She was an old woman who looks to be in her 70s at least. She was wearing a worn-out Ankara and holding a bag. Would this one have money to pay me? He thought. Please, my son, help me. As soon as he heard her fragile voice, he became annoyed. Why were the customers he carried always broken? This woman already looks like she had trekked a long route, and now he was sure she expected him to help her for free. He thought about charging her far more than usual. But, judging by her worn-out clothes, he wasn't sure she could afford it. Where are you going? He asked with irritation. She said she was heading to a neighborhood on the outskirts of town. The fare to the area was usually 7,000 naira, and he was still thinking of how much more he would charge her when she said, My son, please, I'll pay 14,000 naira. Please, I need to get home. Immediately he heard the price she proposed. Uche became happy. Oh, so she really had money. Maybe her grandchildren had just sent her something. Then an idea struck him. He turned to her and said, Mama, the place you are going to is very far and fuel is scarce, and I cannot go that price. I'll go for 35,000 naira, or I won't go at all. Haba, my son, she exclaimed. That's unfair. Please, let's leave it at 20,000 naira. Okay, if you don't want to pay, find another cab, Uche said, while starting his car again. Looking defeated, the old woman pleaded with him to wait. She looked around the empty park and said, Okay, let's go. I will pay you. Pay me now, before we start the journey. Pay me, Uche said, looking at the old woman with irritation. He watched as she brought out her purse and counted the money, leaving her with just 2,000 naira. He snatched the money from her, recounted it and hid it under his car chair. Then looked towards her and said, Oya, enter, let's go. The old woman entered the car and closed the door gently. Uche did not say a word to her. Lost in his fantasy about how he would spend the money, he began to drive. The drive was long and silent. Even when the old woman tried to start up a conversation, Uche ignored her, pretending to be too focused on the road. When they finally reached her house, she muttered a thank you to Uche and got out of the car. As he drove away, his phone slipped from his lap and tumbled onto the passenger seat floor. He sighed, "Oh," pulled over and reached down to retrieve it, then frozen. Lying just beside his phone was a bracelet. He picked it up slowly, turning it over in his hand. It was heavy. Could this be real gold? He thought to himself. He thought of calling the old woman back. But then, finders were keepers, right? It was not his fault she was too dumb enough to lose it. He felt the bracelet and imagined how much he could get for it. It was my lucky day, he thought to himself, before shoving it in his glove compactor and driving off. The next morning, Uche woke up happy. He kept humming songs while he had his bath and dancing around in his room a few times, thinking of how much he would get for the bracelet after work. He got in his car, bought fuel, and then drove to the park. As soon as he arrived, two customers ran to his car and started arguing about who he should take first. At first, Uche did not think much of it. After all, passengers fighting for a ride wasn't new. But by noon, the same thing had happened more than 6 times. What puzzled him most was that there were plenty of other cabs in the park. Yet, passengers kept picking his car. No matter where he parked, they always found him and insisted on riding with him. By midday, he had already made his usual end in 2 full days. The other drivers had started watching him with envy. Passengers kept coming non-stop. By nightfall, his pockets were full of money. He realized it was too late to go to the market to sell the bracelets. But that didn't bother him. It has already been a very good day. The next 3 days followed the same pattern, barely giving Uche time to sell the bracelets as planned. But on the 4th day, he mistakenly left it at home, and strangely, he barely got a ride. Even when he approached the passenger who had fought to get into his taxi just a day before and had tipped him generously. But the man did not recognize him and denied even meeting him. Uche sat quietly in his car, watching the same drivers who had eyed him with envy, now loading their cars with ease. He began to wonder what had changed. He was a smart man and did not believe in coincidence. The only difference was the bracelet. To test his theory, he rushed home, picked it up and placed it back in his car. Within minutes, passengers were swarming him like bees to honey. Uche smiled to himself. He knew his life has changed for the better. He began to treat the bracelet like a secret weapon. Who cared if he had stolen it? He deserved this luck after all these years he had struggled. This was his consolation. One day, after his usual rush of customers, a fellow driver walked up to Uche, patted him on the back and said, "Uche, one woman is looking for you. Come, let me show you." He led Uche to the spot near where the drivers usually eat. As soon as they arrived, Uche spotted her, the old woman, sitting quietly, waiting for him. She looked at him with the gaze he could not understand, and stood up slowly to meet him. In a low but steady voice, she said, "Give me my bracelet." Uche immediately became angry. "See me see wahala," he shouted. "Which bracelet? Madam, I don't know what you're talking about. Please leave me. I have work to do," he said as he began to walk away. But shockingly, she grabbed his clothes with surprisingly firm hands. "Uche, you don't know who you are talking to. Where is my bracelet?" Uche was surprised by her grip, but he flung her hand away from him and said, "It seems you have gone mad with age, this woman. I don't know what you are talking about." The old woman smiled and told him that since he wanted to pretend, then he should keep the bracelet. But he should also remember that she tried to take it back. Something about the way she said it made Uche scared. But before he could respond, she turned and walked away, leaving him shaking. Still, Uche brushed it off. She was just saying rubbish and the bracelet was his. Over the next few days, Uche continued making more money than he ever had. And oftentimes, he made enough money that he went home early. After once in a while, he would check on the gold bracelet, paranoid that someone would steal it from him. After about 2 months, something started happening. Uche began to notice that things were becoming weird. One day, he went to a restaurant after ordering pounded yam and egusi soup with more meat than he could finish. He went to wash his hands. In front of the wash hand basin of the restaurant was a mirror. As Uche washed his hands, he looked in the mirror and saw that his reflection was smiling. But Uche knew he was not smiling. He screamed and one of the attendants in the restaurant rushed towards him to find out the problem. But when Uche looked at the mirror again, nothing was wrong. He left the restaurant in a hurry and went home. At home, he kept looking at the mirror, wondering if something was wrong or if he was losing his mind. Did he imagine the reflection? What was going on with him? Troubled by this event, he eventually went to sleep. When Uche woke up the next morning, he convinced himself that yesterday's event was a result of tiredness. He went to work and made his first route of the day. He picked up 4 passengers, but only 3 of them came down when they got to the bus stop. He started questioning his memory. Did he pick up 3 people and forgot them? What exactly was going on? Did his passenger disappear? No. How could this be? His thoughts quickly turned to the bracelets. After all, that was when the strange things had started happening. Still, he shook his head and pushed the idea aside. He was just imagining things. That had to be it. No matter how much Uche tried to convince himself that nothing was wrong, things kept getting stranger. One afternoon, he picked up 2 passengers. Not long into the ride, the woman suddenly screamed, "Where is my brother? I entered this car with him. Where is he?" Uche turned to check the back seats, but only 1 passenger was there. And clearly, he remembered picking up 2. He quickly pulled over to the side of the road. The woman was crying and shouting, and Uche sat frozen in shock. A crowd soon gathered, eyeing him with suspicion. Something was wrong, and he had no idea how to fix it. That evening, the woman's brother was found in a bush, far from any route they had taken. No one could explain how he got there. But rumors spread quickly. It was said Uche's car was cursed, that he was using passengers for rituals. It became so intense that Fam threw the bracelet out of his car and took a break from work. After a week of rest, Uche took his taxi out for a ride, and everything seems to be going smoothly. Then, he opened his glove box and saw the bracelets again. Fear gripped him. He had thrown it out. He clearly remembered flinging it out from his can. Then, how was it still here? He picked it up, but quickly dropped it because it was too hot to touch. Glancing at his mirror, he saw the old woman in the reflection. But while he turned around, no one was there. Uche felt like he was losing his mind. After that day, he locked himself inside his house, but still could not escape. He dreamt of shadows and saw the old woman standing over him. He often waked in cold sweat, and though he tried to throw the bracelet away again and again, it always ended up in his glove box. Desperate, he decided to sell the car with the bracelet hidden inside. He found a buyer and completed the sale. Uche thought he was finally free. He celebrated with drinks that night, but when he woke up the next morning, the bracelet was in his hands. Uche became scared. He had to find the old woman. He wanted to return the bracelet. So, he set out to look for her, finding his way to the house where he had dropped her. But when he got there, he saw an old dilapidated building. He was sure it was the right place, but this wasn't the house. The windows were broken, the compound overgrown with weeds. The door was missing and part of the roof had collapsed. It was clear no one lived there. He asked neighbors about the house, and they all said that no one had lived there for over 20 years. Uche went home feeling hopeless. But immediately after Uche got home and opened his door, he saw the old woman sitting in a chair in his parlor. He opened his mouth to scream, but no sound came out. The old woman smiled at him. "Are you not looking for me? Why are you scared now that I'm here?" Uche immediately fell to his knees, finding his voice. He begged the woman to take her bracelet and leave him alone. "What bracelet? I thought you said you did not have it," she said, smiling mischievously. Uche continued to beg her to take the bracelet. He removed it from his wrist and stretched it out to her. The old woman laughed, but collected the bracelet. She stood up and walked towards Uche, pressing her hand to his temple and murmuring a few words in a language he did not understand. Once she removed her hand, an intense headache took Uche and stopped almost as soon as it had started. Then she said to him, "Don't look at your reflection for the next 24 hours, and then you will be free." Before Uche could say anything, she had disappeared, and he collapsed on the floor, gasping for breath. Later, as he sat in the dark waiting for the last few hours to pass, hunger groaned at his stomach. He had been carefully keeping his eyes low, avoiding reflective surfaces and counting the hours until he was free. But then, a thought crept in. He still had leftover fried turkey from the day before. His friend was coming over the next day, and he did not want to share it. Why let himself starve just because of some old woman's warning? As he stood and moved towards the kitchen, a voice in his head whispered that he was being reckless. But greed pushed him forward. He would eat quickly without looking at anything reflective. So what was the harm? Then he reached for a plate, but he caught his reflection in the microwave glass. It smiled back at him, cold, sinister, then moved. The last thing Uche pictured was the old woman laughing before darkness took him. This story highlights how our choices, especially those made out of selfishness or greed, can spring into ruin. Uche's downfall came not just from stealing, but from disregarding the warnings and justifying his wrongdoings. Even as he has seen signs that something was wrong, he kept pushing his luck until it consumed him. The tale reminds us that some games are so good to be true, and what you take without permission will end up taking everything from you. And finally, when we prioritize profit over integrity, the price we pay will be far greater than we imagined. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I enjoyed sharing it with you. I look forward to reading your thoughts in the comment section. Until next time, take care and bye-bye.